Good morning. I am happy and grateful to share space with you today on Peace with Justice Sunday and on this Memorial Day weekend. Tomorrow, on Memorial Day, we will remember and give thanks to those who have died in service to our country. John F. Kennedy said, "As we express gratitude, we must never forget that the highest appreciation is not to utter words, but to live by them." It is in the consideration of these living words, these words filled with action, that we come together today. When Pastor George and Sherry Atkinson came to me and asked me to speak here, I initially thought it was for a small peace and justice meeting. Later, after I agreed to speak, I discovered that I would, in fact, be speaking at not one, but 3 Sunday services for up to 30 minutes. Imagine my excitement. Feeling a little bit overwhelmed, I asked Pastor George for a little direction. "What do you want to hear?" I asked, and he responded, "What is your vision for the community? What can each of us and all of us do to address racial injustice, bigotry and violence, the crisis of homelessness, housing inequity, and the loss of empathy amid increasing polarization? How can we work for peace with justice?" Well, now I understood this small task, and I felt much better about crafting my message. How can we work for peace with justice? How have we worked for peace with justice over this past pandemic year? These last 14 months have been filled with shared and unexpected disruption, chaos, loss, and grief. So much grief. It seemed as though the earth had tilted on its axis in March of 2020, that our lives had slid into a sudden strangeness. Nothing was as it had been or as we had anticipated it would be. Collectively, we held our breath in anticipation of what might come next. Over 900,000 Americans had their breath taken by COVID-19, and others had it stolen at the knee of systemic racism. This past year has felt almost apocalyptic at times. In Greek, however, the word apocalypse actually means an uncovering or a revelation. In these dark times, points of light pierced through, revealing gifts of time for us to reflect and contemplate on who we are to each other, how we accompany one another, and how we protect each other. We heard stories about neighbors reaching out to other neighbors who previously didn't even know each other's names, who now check in on one another regularly. My neighbors held nightly Zumba classes out in the street. I met and became new friends with vulnerable members of our senior community who were isolated not only by quarantine in the pandemic, but also by a disconnection from neighbors, family, and community, often exacerbated by a lack of internet access. I had a special experience with one of my new friends, Miss Alicia, a single, elderly woman who was always so grateful for my deliveries and especially for our conversations. She shared that she loved watching church services on TV. It was the Monday after Easter 2020. I don't know if you remember, but Andrea Bocelli performed a lonely and lovely and beautiful Easter concert in and outside of the Duomo di Milano in Italy. He sang Amazing Grace outside the towering building while cameras showed the eerily quiet streets throughout Italy. It was very moving. I arrived that morning at Miss Alicia's house, and I called her from my car like I always did. And we talked for a while about her weekend and my weekend, about the kids dyeing eggs. And I let her know that I was in front of her home and ready with her food delivery. I asked her in passing if she had seen Andrea Bocelli's performance from the day before. She hadn't, because she didn't have internet access. I put on my mask and carried a cardboard box filled with a week's worth of meals up to her door and set it down outside. Masked, she stayed behind the screen door. We talked a little bit more, and I asked if she would like to hear Bocelli sing Amazing Grace. She did. So I took my phone out, I pulled up YouTube, steadied myself with a wide stance in front of her door. I closed my eyes and with outstretched arms held the phone out in front of me as Andrea Bocelli sang Amazing Grace directly to Miss Alicia. He closed. Was blind, but now I see. With a wet face, I opened my leaky eyes to find Miss Alicia on her knees behind her screen door, tears rolling down her face as she sang along with the last notes. That moment was a gift for both of us that never would have occurred if the earth had continued to spin unabated. But then our common challenge became politicized. Suddenly, choosing to wear a mask to protect each other became something else, a statement about whose side you were on, and not about protecting your neighbor or their immunocompromised child or parent or grandparent. Community relies on trust. Without that trust and common care for one another, we became further divided and definitely a smaller and weakened Huntington Beach community in that moment. At one point, we discovered that multiple people experiencing homelessness in our community had been poisoned. Many of them couldn't breathe, and they were taken to the hospital. At the same time, we saw anger and rhetoric continue to ratchet up around the issue of homelessness. The need to engage in civil and compassionate conversation about these challenges became more apparent and also more challenging in a time when Zoom and not a neighbor's living room or the walls of a church became the meeting place of the day. We saw a complete disruption in our individual lives, in our community, in our businesses, in our country, and in our world. It's important to note that these disruptions did not affect all of us equally. But the crack is the place where the light gets in. These ruptures laid bare a need to further reflect on the systems that work to keep us safe, to ensure that they keep all of us safe, regardless of our skin color, class, gender, occupation, etc. These fractures uncovered the need to do real work and to identify tangible systemic change in multiple areas. These breaks provided us with an opportunity to choose what type of conversations we would have and what type of discomfort we would be willing to sit with, to do the work to really become 1HB so we could all collectively catch our breath. In this moment, I invite you to take a moment. Place your hand over your heart, and if you'd like, and I recommend it, close your eyes and take a breath. Breathe in all that was this last year. Inhale the good, the bad, and the grief. Hold it at the top, and now exhale and breathe it out. Let it go. Do that one more time. Inhale all of it, including the good. And then again, exhale and let it go. Maybe you feel more grounded. Maybe you feel the Earth's axis or your axis starting to shift. The peace we are looking for, the peace we are looking to create in our world, must first start with the way we care for ourselves. With practices like mindful breathing, mindful eating, gratitude, movement, and more. We must start where we are, at our center, and then expand outwards. One of my favorite poems is by Rilke, and it goes like this. I live my life in widening circles that reach out across the world. I may not complete this last one, but I give myself to it. I've been circling around God, the primordial tower, for thousands of years, and still I don't know. Am I a falcon, a storm, or a great song? Our life's circles are proclamations of hope and ripples of chosen action. In the United Methodist Church Council of Bishops pastoral letter, it says, as United Methodists, our yearning for peace must move us to act. We have a call to hope and action. After healing from breast cancer in 2015 and experiencing the tremendous polarization and division of 2016, I was compelled to get off the sidelines and to begin to expand my reach and widen my circles. I began first calling myself a hope advocate and later a hope activist. And in 2017, as the late John Lewis would say, I began praying with my feet. I applied for and was appointed to the city's Human Relations Task Force, and later became the chairperson. The mission of the task force is to promote and celebrate diversity in the community through education and understanding. That circle widened to include the Greater Huntington Beach Interfaith Council, and it later widened further to bring me here to CUMC's campus for a meeting on homelessness. I knew I had something to offer, but wasn't quite sure how I could help. So I showed up, open and ready to listen, to receive wisdom, and to bear witness, meeting after meeting with some really wonderful humans. Eventually, I began to see how I could contribute. Together with the great folks at Homeless United Huntington Beach, we hosted the Have a Heart Forum on Homelessness in 2019 and again in February of 2020 here at CUMC. Each time gathering over 80 individuals, including city management, nonprofits, faith leaders, and community members who had a heart and a desire to make things better and to grow their circles. In February of 2020, if you remember, there was still no navigation center, no shelter, and no really obvious progress being made with regards to homelessness. At that Have a Heart meeting, we were lucky enough to have as our speakers a member of Trellis Costa Mesa, our new city manager, Oliver Chi, and my good friend, Pastor James Pike from Lutheran Church of the Resurrection. I remember very clearly two quotes from that night. The first was from Oliver Chi. He commented, "The city of Huntington Beach hasn't yet decided whom it wants to be." The second came from Reverend James Pike, as he opined, "We belong to each other. How would we treat one another if we truly believed that to be true?" As you know, I expanded my circle again in 2020 when I ran for local office. And today, I am lucky enough to be able to have a seat at the table, to have greater influence on our community from a different vantage point, and to continue to make generative change in our community by continuing to widen my circles. I have been able to make tangible change by working to help reframe our approach to homelessness and crisis response, by responding to threats of white supremacy and hate against our AAPI community, by reaffirming the policy about human dignity, by creating a more welcoming and safe community via our community picnic in Central Park and via our virtual town halls, by raising the pride flag throughout the city, a symbol of love, joy, and unity, and by creating more accessible and welcoming beaches for people experiencing mobility challenges through the rollout of our Moby Mat at 6th Street on the beach. Abraham Lincoln said, "The best way to predict your future is to create it." We must flex our creative muscles and start with compassion and curiosity. What can each of us do individually, and what can we as a community of faith do to address racial injustice, homelessness, the loss of empathy, and all of the other huge and daunting challenges of our times? Where do we go from here? Jewish scholar and teacher Ariel Berger said, "The way there includes lamentation for our losses, learning the difference between being a spectator and bearing witness, and a sacred understanding of memory as far more than contact with information about the past." What questions and actions will you breathe life into? How will you widen your circles? How will we repair, renew, reimagine, and remake our societies and our life together? How will you grow and share your wisdom, your stories, and your conversations across generations, across the street, and across the aisle? How do we become more open to that which might change us? Will our yearning for peace move us to act? As Pastor Pike said, if we believed that we belong to each other, how would we take care of each other? And as Oliver Chee pondered, have we decided whom we want to be as a city, as a community? Over the last couple of years, I have been shown time and again that the things worth fighting for are hard-won, require cultivating relationships, take time, perseverance, and persistence, and are often quite uncomfortable. But I'm inspired by the late civil rights leader, John Lewis. He discussed living as if the beloved community were already our reality, saying, "I discovered that you have to have this sense of faith, that what you're moving toward is already done. You have to act as if it already exists at some point in the future, and that your work, your efforts, and the incremental changes are just pieces of the puzzle." We need to act as if the future we envision exists already, and keep moving forward to make it so. One of my favorite songs, David Byrne sings, "Then before my eyes is standing still, I beheld it there, a city on a hill. I complete my tasks one by one. I remove my masks when I am done. Then a peace of mind fell over me. In these troubled times, I still can see. We can use the stars to guide the way. It is not that far that one fine day. So I invite you to widen your circles, to look ahead with lucid and luminous optimism toward that one fine day when the ripples of our efforts will overflow and result in positive peace and shalom for all, with no one denied, and shalom and peace undiminished. And then, perhaps, we'll discover whether we are a falcon, a storm, or a great song. Thank you.